So the words you see on the screen come from the passages that our students will hear at Vacation Bible School this week. And so we do this from time to time, this time of the summer, to help create opportunities and conversation where what your kids hear the next 3 nights is also what we're walking through together as a church. But also, we recognize that Jesus calls us to childlike faith, and that we, and by we, I mean me, I can overcomplicate anything. And we as the church sometimes fall into that trap as well. And so we've been asking ourselves in this series, how can we say things, do things, especially when we're talking about what it means to be a church, the things that we do together on a regular basis, how might we say them as straightforward and childlike as possible? How might we be able to communicate these things in ways that are real and meaningful to any age? Just think about it like this. If you asked a child to describe church, what might they say? If you asked a child to describe church, what might they say? Now, I think there's a couple different ways we can come at this. If you ask a child, what do you like the most about church? They are probably going to start with the snacks. Incidentally, I'm told that when I was a kid, the snacks is what I called communion, that my parents would say. I would say, are we having the snacks at church today? They would be like, no, that's only the first Sunday of every month. If kids are being honest, and you can trust kids for the most part to be honest in a straightforward kind of way that we sometimes are less so, kids would probably start with the snacks. That's why Kelly and her team, in part, work very hard out here in hospitality to create those opportunities for kids to have and adults to have a meaningful first impression and first connection point with our church. That's one reason why at Vacation Bible School this week, our kids, as they've been for the last few years, are going to be challenged to bring boxes of cereal in for our food pantry. We'll do girls against boys. Let me say that last year we had a ringer in the girls department who, bought outrageous numbers of cereal, and the boys had no chance. So I'm here for it. If you want to be a ringer this year too, you're welcome to. But the boys are looking for revenge in that department this year. But we do that, and we end up putting all these boxes of cereal up here on the altar. If you've ever seen a picture of that and you thought, what is this church about? We're like, exactly. We like to keep you guessing. But cereal in the food pantry. The reason we do that is because when kids come through the line over here every weekday, at a time right now when they're seeing all kinds of record numbers of people come through the food pantry, showing up at a food pantry can be a hard thing to do at any age. It can be an especially confusing and difficult season for a kid. And so being able to say to a family that has kids, especially that has kids in the car, in the food pantry, to be able to say, hey, do you want some Lucky Charms? Or some tricks or whatever. And that's what we'll invite, or that's what your kids, parents, grandparents will invite you to do this week, is whatever your favorite is, bring that. We're not looking to bless the food pantry with 800 boxes of rice checks or, whatever. And I like rice checks, but there's great value in helping people be seen. And not just seen as in, I'm coming through the food pantry and I don't know how I feel about that, and I don't know how my parents feel about it, but seen as in, they saw me and they have something for me, and there's something here that's real and of great value. It's not that the mission statement of our children's ministry is good snacks. My mom was a children's pastor for 2 decades. The longer I do this pastoral ministry thing, the more I realize that a lot of how I operate as a church staff person is because I'm the son of a 20-year church worker, a 20-year children's pastor. My mom was great at it. And what she always said is the first thing kids need to know about God, is that God loves them. And we need to do whatever we can to help kids get to a place where they can hear that and internalize it for themselves. And we feel like that's part of what helping people be seen does. When a child of any age feels seen and safe and that they can be who they are, that's when the seeds of the kingdom can fall on good soil. Because all of the right answers we really want kids to give about what is a church, that a church is a place where we worship God together, And that a church is, here's the church and here's the steeple, open up the doors. This is the church, right? But a church is not a building, it's the people. Those right answers come most authentically and organically from our kids when they are experiencing those core truths that they are loved by God for themselves. So yeah, in this church, if you ask a kid about this church, and many churches, they might talk about the snacks, and then they might talk about the energy, the music and the dancing and the games and all that. You'll get a chance to see all that next Sunday when we're together. Next Sunday, we're going to have a family Sunday where you can see everything that's been happening at VBS here together. So our kids will be in here with us next week to show off all of this energy and burn off whatever's left. If you ask a kid, they're going to talk about snacks and energy and music and dancing, and we would probably hope in some way that those kids might even describe church as fun. So I say all that to say this. How wide is the gap between how a child would describe church and how we might describe it as adults? I mean, consider that question. Is church supposed to be fun? It's not that the mission statement of this church for the adults is have fun, though we're clearly not opposed to it. We wouldn't want fun to be the first line item in the budget necessarily, but whenever we talk about it, what a wild line item that would be, right? It's like, here's everything that's fun, here's the light bill and the other things, right, that are not fun. Some of us are tempted to run our household budget that way too, I'm sure. Whenever we talk about what the church should be, and we want to bump it up against these childlike kinds of realities and that sort of thing, how do we feel about this? Because the way I feel about this is that I'm not opposed to it at all, but I feel like there's something even better out there, something even more out there than just a place where we get to have fun. Anytime we talk about what the church should be, we always find it helpful to go back and look at the very first things that the church was. And again, that's today. That's this day. Pentecost, if you're new to church, Pentecost, this day, 7 Sundays after Easter, is the day when we celebrate the Holy Spirit coming upon those first disciples, where they start speaking in all kinds of different languages, and people are amazed, and Peter stands up and says, "This Jesus whom you crucified, he has made Lord and Master." And so the church is born. This today, 7 Sundays after Easter, is where we celebrate the birth of the church. So whenever we talk about the church, we want to make sure that whoever we are as a church and whoever we're going to be, that we stay connected to those first truths. So here are those first truths. This is Acts 2. Starting in verse 42. We come back to this all the time. Last summer, our whole church walked through the book of Acts together. When we did a series on our core values, we talked about making sure that whoever we are and wherever we're going, we don't lose this. And not just that we don't lose it, but that we keep it at the front of our minds. That's why we talk about it so often. The first truths of the first church at Pentecost, Acts 2. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers. Awe came upon everyone because many wonders and signs were being done by the apostles. All who believed were together and had all things in common. They would sell their possessions and their goods and distribute the proceeds to all as any had need. Day by day, as they spent much time together in the temple, they broke bread at home, and they ate their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having the goodwill, not of the Christians, they had the goodwill of all the people. And day by day, the Lord added to their number those who were being saved. So if we wanted our kids to know what a church is, or we wanted them to give the right answer, right? There's a list of essentials in here for sure. Teaching, fellowship, prayer, signs and wonders, togetherness, and as we like to say on our sign out front, meeting the needs of people. But don't miss what's also present in this passage: awe quality time, praise, and glad and generous hearts, which we might say sounds even better than fun, all of which invites the goodwill of all the people. As we like to say, is Powell Church good for Powell, even if you don't go to Powell Church? Is Powell Church good for Knox County, even if you don't go to Powell Church? It's not just what captures the goodwill of all the people is not just the teaching and the benevolence. It's the Spirit, capital S, coming down and then coming through those who are following this Jesus together in this movement. Because here's the thing. If you ask a random adult to describe a church, if you go out right now to find Kroger marketplaces and Walmarts and Targets and things like that and say, hey, tell me about a church, what most adults are likely to describe is this hour, this time when we're together in this space. And obviously, this time, this hour together when we're here is important. We work hard every week to make it as meaningful and possible. But do you know what the technical term for this hour is? The technical term for this hour is called corporate worship, which sounds on its face like the least fun thing that a church could do together. Corporate from Latin that means the body. You have to be careful right away to distinguish it from like corpse worship, though perhaps you've been part of a church service before where you looked around and thought, are we dead? This that we do together, this hour, this Sunday morning is called corporate worship, which sounds, even if not anti-fun, it sounds anti-childlike, and we don't talk this way anyway, right? You probably don't reach out to your friends and say, would you like to come to corporate worship with me on Sunday morning? They're not coming, by the way, unless they're weird, in which case they might be a great fit with us, but to say, I just want to know what that is. When someone says, where do you attend church? You probably don't say, well, I attend corporate worship at First United blah, 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 right? Like, this is not typically how we come to describe it. But if you ask an average adult, what they first think of as church is the corporate worship hour. And again, as real and as meaningful as this can be, we would want to distinguish that this is just a fraction of the whole. And I think we're far enough down the path now to be able to say this. One of the best teachers of this was COVID. Because here's the two things we learned in COVID, or at least we learned many things, but here's the two main things we learned 5 years on from COVID about that time. If you're new, I was at a church in Virginia when all that went down, and my wife was 6 months pregnant with our daughter, which I don't recommend it personally, but I highly recommend it professionally as running a church when COVID starts, because everybody in our church was so patient with us. So you go back to those first 2 weeks when nobody knows anything. All we knew is we had a pregnant wife, and Alex's OBGYN told her she could go to the mailbox and couldn't go anywhere else. And so we were doing church live from our living room every week, and it worked really well for that season. But what we also really learned, what I hope you learned too if you were part of this church then, is the doors to corporate worship can be closed, but the church is always open. That's the number one takeaway for me from that whole season is, one, the doors can be closed, but the church is always open, because the church is this. The church is the people inside of it. And so even if the doors to corporate worship are closed, the church can be open. The church can do mission and ministry and prayer and all kinds of these other things. But back in those early days, we would do church live from our living room, and we lived the county over from Blacksburg, Virginia, which is where Virginia Tech is. Had all the good restaurants and stuff, you know. And so we'd get in our car after doing church live from the living room and drive 20 minutes over to Blacksburg and do what seemed like very novel things at the time, like have someone put groceries in the trunk of our car. And we were getting to go or putting on a mask and walking into a restaurant. We were trying to support local restaurants that we loved, walking into local restaurants with a mask on where they would give you your to-go order. And in those early weeks, they'd also be like, we're selling bleach, $5 for $1, like whatever. Just everyone's trying to figure it out. And I remember doing that week after week after week. And there was a part of me that was thinking like, is this it? Are we just never coming back? We got stopped. Corporate worship. Is corporate worship just never coming back? I was worried that even if we did come back, I was worried that we might be running the best Blockbuster Video in the world. Do you know what I mean? Like I would imagine at one point in time, some of the last Blockbuster Videos that were open, some of them were like excellent, and that's how they stayed open so long. They had good management, employees loved working there, they loved movies, they were nostalgic about it, they believed, and this was like the best Blockbuster Video in the world, and it was always going to close because the whole model just doesn't work. My kids don't even know what Blockbuster Video is. And I had that thought about corporate worship in a lot of those early weeks of like, is this just it? And maybe God's doing a new thing, and this whole thing is going to transition into something else. And I know we can be the church. I know we can do mission and ministry and all that, but is this just it for this time? And when I would do that, I used to drive by this Pentecostal holiness church that in COVID was closed for like 5 seconds, and there would be all these cars in the parking lot. And people had different thoughts about that at the time, I know, but what it made me feel is, in some strange way, hopeful that human beings would still come looking for this thing, even if we stopped it for a long time. And what I think we could say 5 years later is that that's also still true. That the truth about what we can do together in corporate worship, the truth about who we can be in this hour, how we can worship together, sing together, learn together, do all that stuff is of such actual meaning and importance that even when you stop it entirely for months and months and months and months, stubbornly and by the grace of God, it still persists, not just here, but all over the world to this day. That there is something real and meaningful about what we do here in this hour, and we have more reason to believe that now, maybe, than ever. But what's also always been true about corporate worship is that it's a small fraction of the whole. And if you think back to what those first churches, what the first church, those first truths of the first church, so many of those things happen outside of the home. Worship, holiness, prayer, those are things we don't just do in this room. Those are things we can do in smaller groups together with friends and families, because that's what Jesus does, is invites people to come and share their life with him. So we've learned we need this. There's something about corporate worship that only happens in this space. And even when we try to shut it down, it's good and right and true and beautiful. And we need what a church can be in the community. But don't miss, if we're trying to describe what a church is, don't miss what it helps us be at home. Because the most dangerous thing you can believe about a church, and the most dangerous mistake a parent can make, is to believe that a church, the building, is the only place your kids will learn about God. In closing, when I was a youth director 20 years ago, I was a youth director in a affluent West Knoxville part of town. And we would do these things where I would say, hey, you want to come paint houses in downtown Knoxville over summer break? And these kids would be like, no, sorry, I'm in Barbados this week. And then I'm over here this week. And I'd be like, okay, we'll have paintbrushes when you're ready downtown. We would get like some of these, you'd give these kids rides home from youth group and pull into these communities and look at these houses. And you would be like, never in my life, never in my dreams am I going to rise to this kind of level. Drop the kid off and I'd drive back to my apartment behind the flea market on Alcoa Highway and be like, yeah, I'm not sure I'm a good fit for this church in this situation. I had a parent in that church look at me, I was just 23, look at me and say, well, like, yeah, but like you're responsible for my child's spirituality. Yeah, that's good. That's the right sound. That's good. Because if you're putting all your hope on me, whew, your kid's in trouble. Deeply. Does your kid want to come paint downtown and come back and see the $415 a month apartment behind the flea market? Like, but it's very easy, even for adults, for us to fall into this temptation to believe that this is the place where we learn about God, and then the rest of the week is just kind of whatever. The truth about that first church is, yeah, they gathered together often in the temple and had experiences with the Holy Spirit that I am sure are incredible and life-changing. And oh yeah, they're selling their possessions and goods. They're taking care of each other. They're looking out for needs. They're doing all of those things. But also, don't forget what it says. This is verse 46. So yeah, they're spending much time together in the temple. But they also break bread at home and they eat their food with glad and generous hearts. I don't know if a church is supposed to be fun or not, but don't miss this notion that there's something about what we do here and how we interact with who God is in our lives that sends us back to our tables or to your tables at lunch and sends us to these places with this reminder that, like, hey, there's good news. And it's for you. And it's for me. Your sins are forgiven if you are in Jesus Christ. There's something about this first church that helps them earn the goodwill of all the people, not just the teaching and the benevolence, but the idea that these folks, these persecuted by the Roman Empire, Messiah just got crucified, these folks go home and eat their food with glad and generous hearts. I don't know if church is supposed to be fun or not, but I believe deeply in a place that helps us live beyond this 1 hour a week. It helps me live with a more glad and a more generous heart. That, I think, is one of the most important things a church does, because that sends us out into the rest of the 23 hours of this day and the other 6 days of the week to remember that there's good news in this world. And it comes from the one who made this world, and it comes in and through our lives so that we have reason and purpose to live with glad and generous hearts. We're always going to be here doing this. I believe that now more than ever. And a good church is always going to be looking out for the people in its community, in its neighborhood, helping them, and around the world, helping them be seen and known and loved. But don't forget, maybe when you get a taste of it, no pun intended, seeing a kid pick up a snack they love out here or watching these kids dance next Sunday, we're also not just called, but inspired, enabled to go home and eat our food and live our lives with glad and generous hearts, because the joy we find in what's been done for us through Jesus Christ and a generous heart from a God who is indeed generous after all these years still to the church.